and these waves are dispersed between cars, which means, in plain language, you must have a big gap between each car, 40 metres, the length of 8 cars, and that gap could soak up all the all the traffic jamming, I suppose. What do you think?
That's what happens in Timaru anyway, doesn't it, Joel? We have at least...
We don't allow traffic jams. We have a set of traffic lights. You don't have traffic jams when you have traffic lights.
Oh, well, you only have one set of traffic lights, don't you?
Yeah, when were you last in Timaru? Goodness me. You're behind the times.
There's a constant gap between cars in Timaru, Jock.
Look, it wasn't so long ago when we were told, when people were going for their driving tests and things, that you kept, was it 1 car length for every 10 miles an hour or something you were travelling at. So if you were doing 100 miles an hour, which cars couldn't do back then, you were 10 lengths away. And isn't this guy actually just reinvented the same sort of idea?
He
I don't know
has,
what ants have got to do with it.
He had, well, ants basically, the way they move, they're very busy little critters apparently, and the way they move is they have a constant space between yourself as an ant and the next ant, and that keeps it very, very smooth. So what do you think, Amanda?
Well, you know, you can imagine this going down like the proverbial in New Zealand. We're very impatient.
Well, that's the problem, apparently.
Yeah, I'm not speaking about myself, of course, but the thing is that people are always in a hurry, and there's a lot of tailgating going on in this country. People like to come right up behind you. Yeah, shivers. We're very territorial on the road. We like to think that this is our space, our place, where it's our right to drive the way we want. I can't imagine us all behaving like a little army of ants.
This is the issue, isn't it? And that's what Professor Nishinati said. He said the real problem here is that we do like going fast. So, you know, the chain reaction of braking is this problem, you know, and it's called rubbernecking, isn't it?
No, rubbernecking's when you're looking at an accident on the side of the road. You know, you're all but it's that we're tailgating when you come up right behind somebody, and you're not keeping enough space. And if you're in a traffic like in Auckland, or sometimes in Wellington, it is that thing where you fill that gap. You want to get to where you're getting, and you don't let others in. It's just we're not very polite drivers, I don't think, in New Zealand.
Well, anyway, this jamologist reckons that he's got the answer. Just briefly on the Auckland bus drivers' situation, the strike right now. Auckland bus drivers working for Richie's Murphy are picketing at St Aidan's Reserve, Takanini. The drivers say they're struggling to spend any time with their families because their shifts can run from 11 to 14 hours a day. When you factor in a couple of hours for travel and 8 for sleep, that doesn't leave much quality time on the table, so the bus drivers say, and that's taking its toll. 11 to 14 hours a day, to both of you sound like a big shift to you?
I just think bus drivers really deserve all the support they can get. The situation that's going on in Wellington at the moment is just an outrage, and the way all these new bus drivers have been treated in terms of this restructuring is so. We've got to give them a better deal.
Brief thoughts, John?
Me too. I think it's potentially dangerous having bus drivers or any drivers, professional drivers, having to work those hours or be available at that time. You can't rest properly.
The other thing is that they're responsible, aren't they, for a lot of people's welfare? So,
of course they are.
Yeah, we'll go to them. Amanda Miller, Jock Anderson on the panel. It's been great to have you on the Friday show.
Thank you.
A pleasure.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa, haere mai o te hotaka o te ahiahi. This is Checkpoint. I'm Alex Perrottet, in tonight for John Campbell. Tonight, the government announces a $4.3 billion investment in road safety. Transport Minister Phil Twyford joins us. The Auckland Council deems a Papakura swamp house unsanitary. It gives the landlord 10 days to clean it up or pay a $200,000 fine. The PM defends her handling of the Meka Whaitiri scandal. Disbelief in Stratford after an independent report recommends its 125-year-old racecourse is going to close. More controversy at the US Open after Australian tennis player Nick Kyrgios gets a pep talk from the umpire, and why the New Zealand Warriors ambassador and number 19 jersey holder, the Mad Butcher, will miss tonight's game.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten tēnei. Traffic and congestion woes may begin to disappear in Auckland and across the country following a multi-billion-dollar government pledge. Transport Minister Phil Twyford today announced a $16.9 billion investment in land transport over the next 3 years. Sophia Duckle-Jones reports.
The announcement focused on easing congestion, improving public transport and making the roads safer. Mr Twyford says almost $2 billion will be invested in public transport, a 56% increase from the past 3 years. Almost $6 billion has been set aside to improve Auckland's roads. The money will come mainly from the National Land Transport Fund, local government and Auckland's regional fuel tax. Ko Sophia Duckle-Jones, aho.
Auckland Council has given the owner of a Papakura swamp house 10 days to fix the property or pay a hefty fine. The council deemed Arvin Raj's home insanitary due to severe drainage problems which create a swamp underneath the house and cause the property to flood. Mr Raj has to fix the problems in time or he may be fined up to $200,000 and $20,000 for every day the issues continue. The government is considering taking Mr Raj to the Tenancy Tribunal on behalf of the tenants. Mr Raj could not be reached for comment today. An immigration lawyer says there's a 99% chance Chelsea Manning's work visas will be approved. Immigration New Zealand gave permission today for the US whistleblower to apply for a work visa. The former US soldier spent 7 years in prison for leaking classified information to WikiLeaks. Lawyer Matt Robson says it's almost guaranteed she'll be allowed into the country unless new information comes to light.
It would have to be some other issue apart from her criminal conviction, something else that perhaps wasn't known. It's always a possibility for anything, but it does, given the scrutiny that Chelsea Manning has had with her life, I don't think there's any other issue that would allow a decision maker to say you can be turned down.
Matt Robson says he's pleased that immigration law has been applied indiscriminately. The Prime Minister has dismissed the political controversies this past week as just part of being in government. Labour Minister Meka Whaitiri has been stood aside while an investigation into a staffing matter is underway. Here's our political editor Jane Patterson.
Sources say Ms Whaitiri has been accused of manhandling her new ministerial press secretary in a confrontation. It tops off a week in which Broadcasting Minister Claire Curran was stripped of 2 other portfolios and sacked from Cabinet. Another low business confidence survey was released and the report into the Young Labour camp was withheld. Jacinda Ardern says that's all just part of running the country. In terms of her own response, she says she'll await the outcome of the investigation before making any decisions about Ms Whaitiri's future. Ms Ardern says she wants the investigation done as soon as possible. From Parliament, Jane Patterson.
An astronaut at the International Space Station has temporarily plugged a leak with his finger to prevent further loss of air pressure. The 2-millimetre wide hole was probably caused by a micrometeorite which struck while the astronauts were asleep. The BBC's Jonathan Amos reports.
Mission controllers were first alerted to the issue by air pressure sensors on board the station. The astronauts were asleep at the time, but when they rose for their day's work, they were instructed to search for the leak. Germany's Alexander Gerst confirmed it was in the Russian Soyuz vehicle that brought him to the station. He identified the 2-millimetre hole's location by pressing his finger over it. An immediate fix was implemented with sealant and tape, but engineers on the ground are now working on how to make a more robust repair.
Jonathan Amos reporting. Racing fans in a central Taranaki township are worried if their club closes, more than a century of history will be lost. Stratford Racing Club is one of 2 clubs in Taranaki identified in a report which recommends 20 courses nationwide put the shutters up. It was formed in 1891 and thousands go to its New Year's meetings. Club President John Gray says he's gutted at the recommendation the club be closed down and training be moved to New Plymouth. He says he understood race days might not be able to continue in Stratford.
But certainly losing the facility as a training track is absolutely gutting for the town as well. It's going to have an economic impact as well. You know, asking us to move up to New Plymouth and train is just not viable.
John Gray says up to 10 trainers use the facilities and about 80 horses are based there. It's 5 minutes past 5. Sport, the New Zealand Warriors will want to give veteran Simon Mannering a fitting farewell in what may be his final run at Mount Smart Stadium tonight when they host the Canberra Raiders in their final regular season match. The Warriors are still in with a chance at hosting an NRL final if they win tonight, but the latest surge by the Raiders could disrupt that with wins over the Rabbitohs and Roosters in the last 2 rounds. Mannering says although he's set to play his 300th club match tonight, celebrations come second.
They are playing really good footy, and that's what our focus is on. For the team, we've got to focus on a tough game against Canberra. Like we've mentioned, it's possibly our last home game, so we want to go out playing at Mount Smart on a good note.
Veteran Warrior Simon Mannering. The New Zealand shot put star Tom Walsh has successfully realised the 3 targets he set himself for 2018 after claiming the Diamond League final title in Zurich this morning. Walsh threw 22.6 metres to claim the title from defending champion Daryl Hill and Olympic champion Ryan Krauser. Walsh picked up $75,000 for the win, but more importantly for him, completed his target for the year.
This year there was 3 things I really wanted to do. One was to win in World Indoors, I did that. Second one was to win Commonwealth Games, I did manage to do that too. And then the third one was to win the Diamond League, and I've managed to do that. So I've had 3 wins right there, and just how I want them.
Shot putter Tom Walsh, good on you. That's the news.
Kia ora, g'day, Paul Brennan on Nights this evening again, and from 7 it's our Sonic Tonic, and tonight it's all about the rent, paying the rent. And after 8 in our Wellington studio, a real-life piper and drummer. They're in the city for a competition over the weekend. We're going to hear from them. And of course, after 9, Country Life, tonight on Nights.
Now we go to the Beths. This is a great song, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. She's just got pop hooks pouring out of her. This lovely, happy, miserable kind of thing going on.
That's Lately with Karen Hay, 10 p.m. weeknights on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waikato, including Coromandel. A few showers, some heavy with possible thunderstorms, clearing overnight. Fog tomorrow morning, then mainly fine before rain returns at night. Waitomo Taranaki, Taumaranui, Taupo and Bay of Plenty. Fine spells and isolated showers today. Fog tomorrow morning, then mainly fine before rain develops in Taranaki and Waitomo at night. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, a few showers clearing this evening, then fine. Whanganui to Wellington, including Taihape and Wairarapa. Scattered rain more persistent about eastern Wellington and southern Wairarapa, with heavy falls possible. Rain clearing overnight and becoming fine. Nelson and Buller through to Fiordland, mainly fine. Scattered rain tomorrow night. Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, areas of low cloud or fog with patchy drizzle, clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. And for the Chatham Islands, rain with some heavy falls, easing to a few showers tomorrow. It's exactly 8 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much, Katrina. Thank you all to listening in and tuning in or streaming or however you are getting in touch with us tonight. It's Checkpoint. I'm Alex Perrottet in for John Campbell. Coming up, the landlord of an Auckland swamp house is given 10 days to clean up or face a $200,000 fine. But first, the man who has been involved in that story is the Housing Minister, Phil Twyford. We're covering as the Transport Minister. He says he's planning to spend big on road safety, injecting $4.3 billion of his transport fund into median barriers, better intersections and road policing. Now, that $4.3 billion is slightly more than the money Phil Twyford will give to public transport, rapid transit and rail. He's also spending another $390 million on walkways and cycleways. He announced today that most of the $16.9 billion investment over the next 3 years will go to the regions rather than the big cities. He's also reducing state highway funding by almost a fifth to fund these road safety projects and regional improvements. Now, we know the bulk of that funding comes from fuel excises, such as the Auckland Regional Fuel Tax. So I went along to the Auckland Transport Operations Centre to ask Phil Twyford how soon those taxes will ease congestion. He began by saying road safety is his priority, and yesterday's crash between a train and a car at Mount Roskill is the sort of thing this investment is tackling.
Yeah, today we've announced the biggest spending on safety, transport safety ever, $4.3 billion. Over the next 3 years. And actually the safety of level crossings, rail crossings, is a critical issue. And in Auckland, as we increase the number of trains on the network and we build light rail, obviously we're going to have to think really carefully and invest to make people safe.
It's a lot of money on roads for the sort of things you're talking about, medium barriers. How What proof do you have, what evidence do you have that this sort of investment is going to work?
Look, it's common sense. We're investing billions of dollars in safety improvements right across the entire roading network. So passing lanes, median barriers, side barriers, rumble strips, upgraded intersections. These are the things that we know can save lives.
They're sort of the things that people take for granted when they're driving on roads, and there might be a perception out there that, well, they're just the small little things that you just take for granted, as I said. So how are you going to convince people that this is more important than piling money into state highways?
Well, I think, people understand that, we could pour tens of billions of dollars into dual carriage expressways, and we would make, 20, 30, 40, 50 kilometres safe. But actually, we want to make several thousand kilometres of roading network safe. And the best way to do that, the most efficient way to do that, is to invest in these kind of safety improvements right across the whole country.
The concern of a lot of people is what's your bang for buck here? Because a lot of the money, the bulk of the money, let's face it, is coming from the fuel excise. Already the fund is mainly propped up by that. You've got the Auckland regional fuel tax on top of that. How can you convince Aucklanders that this investment in the short term will relieve congestion?
Well, I think for Aucklanders there is a real issue here, and what Aucklanders tell me is they want the government to get on and fix the congestion and the gridlock on the roads. They know it's going to cost extra money, and no one likes to shell out more than they have to, but we've got to get this city moving. We've inherited a terrible infrastructure deficit. The city's losing $1.3 billion every year in lost productivity because of the gridlock. This plan gets on and fixes it. So we're investing in hugely increased levels of public transport provision. We're starting to build a modern rapid transit network with our light rail project. We're investing in heavy rail. And these are the things that will get people out of their cars and into public transport. We're also putting $390 million into walking and cycling infrastructure, which again is another alternative that gives people choices.
We hear complaints all the time, and obviously one person tweeting about a bad morning on the full bus doesn't and always giving the entire picture, but we had it the other day in Wellington as well. How soon can you assure people that if they're going to take this plunge of leaving their car at home, if they're just a single person driving to work, and investing in jumping on those buses in the big cities, how can you make them feel secure that this is really a worthwhile investment and they're going to be able to actually get on a bus?
So the bigger projects like the light rail project and like some of the highway projects that we're funding, they will take a little while to come through because you've got to build these things. But actually improving the frequency and the quality of public transport, that delivers the most immediate bang for buck. And we know that if you provide good quality, efficient and frequent services for people, like the Northern Busway, that now brings more people over the bridge every morning into Auckland's CBD than travel in a private car. It's been astoundingly successful. So if you give people good, efficient, frequent services, they will use them.
A lot of this is about safety. You're investing a lot of money in making the roads safe. Interesting statistic, it's as much a cause of road deaths that people are being inattention, I think it was 18.4%, as alcohol and drugs. So is that people texting on their phone, or is it a lack of training? How are you attacking that as a cause of accidents on the roads?
So my colleague, the Honourable Julianne Genter, who's the Associate Transport Minister, she's leading a whole review of the safety strategy for the whole transport system. It includes impairment from drugs and alcohol. It includes what we can do to get people to focus on the road and not be texting. But it also improves the design and the engineering of our roading system, because what we've learned from Sweden and a number of other countries who have very successfully reduced the deaths and serious injuries on their roads is that good design makes a huge difference. We're all human, we make mistakes, and you have to design that into the system, allow for people to make mistakes, but actually design and build a system that reduces the deaths and serious injuries.
And it will never be fully foolproof. Are you concerned of last year's statistics that there's less policing on the roads, less alcohol breath testing, for instance, on the sides of roads? Are you, or have you been at work to increase a police presence on the roads?
Yeah, we've just put a substantial amount of new money into road policing, and we're undertaking a review of how we invest in road policing so we can get the best bang for buck.
Phil Twyford there, the Transport Minister. As Housing Minister at 5:15, He coined the phrase swamp house to describe the Papakura house that you will know very well if you've been tuning into Checkpoint the last few nights. The owner of that house has been given 10 days to fix all the issues with his property or face a fine of up to $200,000. Auckland Council today deemed the home insanitary, serving 10 days' notice to the landlord, Arvin Raj. And alongside that, the government is now investigating Mr Raj and his property and considering whether to take him to the Tenancy Tribunal on behalf of the tenants. Our reporter Zach Fleming and our cameraman Nick Monroe were there this morning when Tenancy Services, a branch of the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, paid a visit.
Two investigators first thing this morning.
They've got told by their bosses in Wellington to drop everything in that this is their priority.
That's Swamp House tenant of almost 2 years, Dawn Robbie. Tenancy Services compelled to act, shocked by what they saw on Checkpoint on Wednesday night. Stormwater pipes that unload under Dawn's home, creating an ankle-deep swamp that makes the house mouldy and damp, and blocked drainage which makes the yard an unusable swamp.
I think that's why we're getting, my daughter's getting bronchitis at 10 months old, and this is the 3rd time she's got it. I've got strep throat, which is like a festive mosquito, a rat for things that just enjoy living in shit. No offence, but this is literally how it feels.
Dawn, a stay-at-home mum, lives there with her partner Cameron, a roofer who works full-time, and their 2 daughters, 10 months old and 3 years old. They pay $520 a week for what the Housing Minister Phil Twyford described on Wednesday as
absolute disgrace. We're treating this as a very serious allegation and giving it a priority as an investigation.
Tenancy Services Head of Compliance, Steve Watson. Investigators spent 2 hours at the property this morning.
What we may consider doing is taking civil action if we believe the matter was serious enough.
Alongside that, Auckland Council has issued the landlord, Arvin Raj, with an insanitary notice, meaning he has 10 days to fix the issues. And remedial works may force the family to move out, so today they're desperately trying to find a new rental. And because that's so urgent, they've been advised to get rid of their dog to bolster their chances of securing one.
My dog's his family too, and I need security too. I need to know that my kids and me are going to be safe while my partner's at work, and I'm not going to have that anymore.
The landlord, Arvin Raj, has repeatedly refused interview requests since Wednesday. When we visited his family home yesterday in nearby Manurewa, we were sworn at and the police were called. Mr Raj's lawyer yesterday told us his client was fixing the problem.
I am attending to all matters that needs to be fixed.
But Dawn says she hasn't heard from Mr Raj since Tuesday and no workmen have been on site.
Arvin Raj, I honestly believe if you're watching this, I hope you feel sorry. I hope you didn't apologise this whole week, and I pray to God that you honestly feel sorry, because at the moment I honestly think you don't care. You don't care about my family, you don't care about my dog, you don't care about the consequences of what families and tenants have to go through to get into a healthy new home because you chose to not protect your investment. And I personally blame you, and I'm definitely going to hold you accountable because I'm very upset. Just the fact that I'm losing my family dog over this.
The Housing Minister says he didn't direct Tenancy Services to investigate, but is pleased that it is.
There is no excuse for people being kind of forced to live in conditions like that in New Zealand in the 21st century. And I'm glad that the officials have intervened. And I'm committed to making sure that we change the laws around renting and the standards of rental housing to make sure this sort of thing doesn't happen again.
And Tenancy Services says it will be contacting Mr Raj in the coming days, as well as other agencies,
such as council and other regulators who might have an interest in this, and we will endeavour to involve them and do a joint investigation if that's appropriate.
And if Mr Raj doesn't fix the issues within 10 days, he can be fined up to $200,000 and $20,000 for every day the issues continue after that. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
At 19 minutes past 5, the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, is defending how she dealt with her sidelined Minister, Meka Whaitiri, saying she acted as soon as she could. The low-profile Ikaroa Rauwhiti MP stepped aside from all her portfolios yesterday after Ms Ardern launched an inquiry into what she called a staffing matter. RNZ has been told Ministerial Services is investigating an accusation that Ms Whaitiri pushed her new press secretary after a heated argument this week. Here's our political reporter, Craig McCulloch.
As a cloud hangs over Meka Whaitiri, the Prime Minister's doing little today to clear it up.
I'm not going to comment on an investigation while it's being undertaken. I do want to leave all of that for the work that's being undertaken. Again, I'll await the feedback that I get from Ministerial Services. It wouldn't be appropriate to comment any further until that's done.
RNZ understands the investigation centres on claims Ms Whaitiri manhandled her new female press secretary. Sources say the East Coast MP is difficult to work with and point to a high turnover in her ministerial office. But while the inquiry is underway, Jacinda Ardern isn't commenting.
As soon as I found out about this issue, I took action to make contact, of course, with the Minister. And once we have the report completed, then I will make a decision on how to deal with it. But of course, it's only fair that we look into it properly first.
The Deputy Prime Minister, Winston Peters, has been kept in the loop. He says Ms Ardern alerted him ahead of the investigation being announced, but won't comment till it's complete.
Allegations are not fact. They're allegations. Let's see whether they're meritorious or not.
The controversy tops off a bad week for the government. In particular, last Friday, Claire Curran was demoted from Cabinet and lost 2 portfolios after failing to properly record a second meeting. The coalition will be acutely aware of the perception which could build among voters.
I think it's a little bit of the end of the honeymoon period for Jacinda, that it's not all babies and sweetness and wonderful.
I think it's fairly normal for a new government that has been out for a long time, and they have selection processes that are not directly controlled by the Prime Minister. So some people may get in that are not necessarily suited to the job, and they're just dealing with it. It's happening.
The opposition leader, Simon Bridges, for one, is making sure the trend isn't lost on the public.
Things are coming apart at the seams. I think you've got a situation with a series of fiascos. Claire Curran, the young Labour camp, Shane Jones playing games, and Meka's standing aside over what must be on the face of it pretty serious.
It's called being in government.
It's true all Prime Ministers face road bumps outside their own making, but too many, one after another, can begin to look messy. It's why even as Jacinda Ardern waits for the investigation's outcome, she sent a warning to her other ministers.
And I do set high expectations, and I think the public at least will see when those expectations aren't being met, I'll act.
Ms Ardern says the investigation will be completed as soon as possible. Atu iti whare parimata mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Craig McCulloch.
22 minutes past 5. A decision to slate the Stratford Racing Club for closure is being met with disbelief in the central Taranaki township, which fears that more than 125 years of history will be lost. Stratford is one of 2 clubs in Taranaki, the other one is at Hawera, identified in an independent report given to Racing Minister Winston Peters, which recommends 20 courses nationwide put the shutters up. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin has more.
8560, the Quaddy 6238.
The Stratford Racing Club was formed in 1891 and its New Year's meetings are a fixture on the town's social calendar, with thousands turning out to Te Kapua racecourse. Club President John Gray says he's gutted at Australian expert John Massara's recommendation to close it down.
You know, it's having a huge impact on a number of trainers down there, owners, personnel at the club, volunteers and members, and you know, if this report that's come out is seen through, yeah, it's a very, very sad day for racing, not only in Stratford but Taranaki in New Zealand.
Mr Gray, who manages a TAB in New Plymouth, says up to 10 trainers use the club's facilities and about 80 thoroughbreds are based there. He says the recommendation to shut up shop completely is difficult to understand.
I think we could probably see on the horizon that, you know, the race day side of things wasn't going to exist for much longer in places like Stratford, but certainly losing the facility as a training track is absolutely gutting for the town as well. It's going to have an economic impact as well. You know, asking us to move up to New Plymouth and train is just not viable.
John Gray says the club has money in the bank, 130 members, and would be financially viable even without a race day. Gallops trainer Chris Bothwell is based at the Stratford Club, where his father was headquartered before him. Mr Bothwell says running the stable anywhere else just wouldn't be the same.
Say I had to go to New Plymouth, they might allocate me 16 boxes. But it's just boxes. You can't let horses be horses and have the paddocks for the day, run around, play, roll in the mud. They're just, yeah, they're pretty much like factory hens.
And a closure would be, he says, a huge loss for Stratford locals.
It's just a lovely racecourse to see gone. It gets great support. There's probably more than 4,000 people that come and support our New Year's Eve race day, which is a great turnout for the community.
Yeah, it'd be a big event around here, wouldn't it?
Oh, it's a huge event, and it looks like it might be our last race day. So,
shoppers on Stratford's Broadway didn't have a good word to say about the idea.
It's always a big day out when there is a racing event here, especially on New Year's Eve and that. Probably half the town packs the place out, so it'd be sad to see it not here, that's for sure.
I think it's an absolute freaking shame.
Half the places are closing down and it's very sad. But to lose the racing club, it would be a very big blow.
I think it's a bad idea. Races are good to go to, everybody loves going to the races, so keep it open.
Well, I got a lot of mates that race and yeah, it'll be shit.
At New Plymouth's Pukekura Raceway, course attendant Jeff Herbert is mucking out the stables. Mr Herbert says the report, which recommends almost halving the number of tracks nationwide, has been causing a lot of anxiety amongst trainers.
And they've been all pretty worried about what's been going to go on, sort of thing, so they've been waiting for this report to come out.
So what were people saying about their worries about the report?
Just what courses were going to close. It's their livelihood and they don't really know where they're actually going.
The report concludes the industry is in a state of serious malaise, and Mr Herbert says it's been obvious for a while that something has to change. He says some trainers are struggling to make a decent living.
They're up at 4 o'clock in the morning, they work through till 10, they go home, they've still got horses to do at home, then they're back at 3 o'clock and they work till 5, 6 o'clock at night. You know, it's huge hours. You know, if you were doing those hours, you'd be wanting big money. Well, unless they get a really good horse or whatever, they don't get it.
Winston Peters says he intends to have officials produce a cabinet paper with a set of proposals for the industry, which means the status quo is unlikely to prevail. Also among John Masara's 17 recommendations is to outsource the TAB's commercial activities to an international operator. I Taranaki mō te hōtaka o te ahi pone, ko Robin Martinaho.
It's 27 minutes past 5. As we speak, rugby league fans in Auckland are braving the rain and arriving at Mount Smart Stadium for the Warriors' final home game of the season. It's a sellout this evening as the Warriors celebrate veteran Simon Mannering's 300th game, and fans have been allowed to pay whatever they like to get in. But there will be one glaring omission in the stands. The Mad Butcher, Sir Peter Leach, has been told by doctors to stay home, so we caught up with him a little earlier to ask him what was up.
Well, no, I've had a little bit of a problem. I've been in hospital for a few days and, look, to be honest with you, I could go to the game, but the doctors advised me to go home and watch it on the TV, so that's what I'm going to do.
Well, that's very prudent, and it's going to be a wet night. How do you think those Warriors are going to go? Last game of the season before the finals.
Well, Alex, it's a sellout crowd. It has started to rain in Auckland, to be fair, which is quite sad because a lot of seats are uncovered and we do have a sellout crowd. Simon Mannering will become the 34th player in the premiership history of the game to break the 300th game record. He will just be the 16th player to play all of his games for one club. He will follow people like Cameron Smith, Darren Lockyer, all played for one club, you know.
We're almost seeing an end to that generation, aren't we, Peter? We've got only a small number of them left that have been faithful to the one club in what's now a real big business game. How do you think he might even get a few more games in after his 300th, depending on how the Warriors go in the finals?
Oh, no question about that. But look, Alex, he's the most underrated player in the NRL, in my humble opinion. I've been watching the game for over 50 years. And I believe he's the most underrated guy. He is so humble, mate. He is so humble. We had a luncheon for him the other day at the club, and mate, this is how humble he is. He got up at one stage and said, "Oh, let's cut it short. Let's get back, so the boys can get their lunch." You know, he's a very, very humble person. One of the best, mate. He's loved by everyone. I've never heard anyone say a bad word against him. Never.
And that's despite him reaching all sorts of heights. He took over from Benji Marshall as the captain of the Kiwis. There's not too many things he hasn't been able to achieve there at the Warriors and internationally as well.
Mate, even when he was replaced at captain, not a murmur out of him. You know, in actual fact, he told me personally he was quite happy, you know, because he could then just focus on his own game, you know. But he is, look, I just hope everyone that's got a ticket turns up and we give him the send-off tonight with a victory. I hope the boys, you know, the boys all spoke well at the function. And I said to one guy, it's all very well bloody speaking like that, but the proof is in the pudding on the game on Friday night. A win.
Absolutely. Peter, I want to get, if I could, just another one of your unbiased opinions here. It's a very even field, this final series. If the Warriors stay at 8th, it's by no means are they out of the competition. How do you think they're going to go?
Mate, how long's a piece of straw? To be very honest with you, Alex, it depends what team turns up on the day. We've had some great wins and we've had some terrible losses. So we just don't know. But if they turn up to play, we're going to win the premiership. Simon Mannering, you'll be having the Warriors, the NRL trophy in your cupboard.
There's a guarantee from the Mad Butcher himself. Final thing, Peter, you're missing tonight's game because of ill health and you obediently following the doctor's orders. How many have you missed in your time? Not too many, I wouldn't say.
No, mate, you could count them on one hand, and I don't even, that would be many to be fair. And look, can I just say to you and your listeners, I am gutted to lose. I am gutted to be missing tonight's game, but your health always comes first. And can I say to you, Alex, a little tip from the butcher to you and all your male listeners. If you're not feeling right, go to the doctor, like the butcher. All right?
Sir Peter Leach there with a public service announcement. We thought we might just finish the interview there, but yeah, we might take his advice if that applies to you. If you are getting along to the game, braving the weather tonight, kick-off is at Mount Smart Stadium at 8 p.m. Thanks for tuning into Checkpoint. I'm Alex Perrottet. Coming up after the news, a green light for Chelsea Manning from immigration. Catholic boarding school Hato Petra will close after 90 years. And problem gambling advocates call for electronic gaming machines to be removed from South Auckland. We'd love your feedback as well. Get in touch on the text 2101. You can tweet us at CheckpointRNZ, Facebook us Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. But of course, Katrina Baden with the headlines.
I feel like I need to just clear my throat after listening to Peter Leach
Yeah,
going,
that's
mate,
right.
mate.
Listen, you don't need to worry about his public service announcement and health advice, though.
No, that's good.
I'll take care of that.
That's quite good. Mate, the government is to pour billions of dollars into improving the country's roads. Transport Minister Phil Twyford has announced a $16.9 billion investment in land transport over the next 3 years. Almost $2 billion will go to public transport, a 56% rise on spending in the past 3 years. Some $6 billion will go to improving Auckland's roads. The owner of the so-called Papakura Swamp House has been given 10 days to fix the property's drainage problems or pay a fine worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Arvin Raj's home has been deemed insanitary due to leaking pipes which enable water to pool underneath it. The government is considering taking him to the Tenancy Tribunal on behalf of the tenants. Mr Raj could not be reached for comment. Chelsea Manning is 99% likely to be granted the work visa she needs to speak in the country. The US whistleblower was given permission to apply for the visa today. Immigration lawyer Matt Robson says since the criminal conviction, her life has been under intense scrutiny and he doesn't think anything else is likely to block her entry. The Prime Minister is dismissing the political controversies of the past week as just part of being in government. Labour Minister Meka Whaitiri is the latest in a series of problems for Jacinda Ardern, which started with the sacking from the cabinet of Claire Curran. Ms Whaitiri has been accused of manhandling her new ministerial press secretary in a confrontation. The release of another low business confidence survey and the withholding of the report into the young Labour camp capped the tough week. An astronaut at the International Space Station has temporarily plugged a leak with his finger to prevent further loss of air pressure. The 2-millimetre wide hole was probably caused by a micrometeorite, which struck while the astronauts were asleep. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock.
Thank you very much, Katrina. We'll hear from you after 6. We're going to Madison Reedy for a business chat. There's a bit of angst around KiwiSaver providers. It's been described as a Wild West. Why is that?
A Wild West was the term that came from Sam Stubbs, who is the managing director of Simplicity, which is this kind of low-cost, no-frills KiwiSaver provider. Now, he took it upon himself to do some research of his competitors, as this industry typically always does. You know, they're always keeping tabs on each other. So
I was going to say, how objective is it?
Exactly, and I did ask that question, and I have a response about that a little bit later as well. Good. So what he did was he went onto these KiwiSaver savings calculators that are these online calculators on all of the providers' websites, and he pretended to be a 20-year-old male who earns a $40,000 salary, contributing 3% a year. And he said, "What will you save me by the time I retire at 65? And one would expect that most KiwiSaver providers would be pretty much all about the same with that same sample KiwiSaver person. But what he actually found was some major variances. So Simplicity said for that person they could save them $460,000. Other providers had estimates around $1.3 million.
Wow.
And he actually took this to the Financial Markets Authority, who are investigating it under some fair dealing provisions, because he obviously said this is a bit of a Wild West. He actually said it beggars belief. He said this is some snake oil type stuff.
What do they say?
The Financial Markets Authority didn't actually say all too much. They just said we are investigating, and once they're investigating, you know, closed doors, we can't ask too much.
And the other providers, did you get in touch with them?
I did. So I spoke to Milford Asset Management today, and they said that they were one of the higher end estimates towards that kind of 1.3 million. They said that's just because they make better investments, that they're looking offshore, they have a good team, and they're pretty confident with that. Some others have said that, you know, some industry-wide discussions on this would be good to reduce the large differences in variances, because obviously it doesn't look very good. But yeah, I mean, there is a little bit of discussion out there about that at the moment.
Okay, we'll stay tuned to that. Now, you've walked in here, for those who aren't watching, with a big report and you've slammed it down on the table. It's from the Commerce Commission and it's looking into telecommunications companies. What's it all about?
So I've looked through all 71 pages, so you do not have to.
Good.
Pretty interesting. So the Commerce Commission, which is the competition watchdog, has been undergoing this study of the telecommunications industry, which is your mobile market providers, since last year. Today they dropped on my desk a big issues paper, so that's online, anyone can go and read it. They looked at the current competition and also future competition with the likes of 5G being rolled out soon. What they found was that bundle packaging of calls and data, which is becoming really prevalent at the moment, it's what most people want. They found it to be pretty expensive in New Zealand, and in one case that it was actually 55% more expensive than our friends across the ditch in Australia. Wow. So they just want the industry to explain why. A bit of a please explain notice.
Sure. Quick wrap of the markets.
The week actually closed down 0.25%, but again that's after a wild week with that outage I think on Wednesday. So that was down 27 points to 9,313. New Zealand dollars buying at 66.5 US cents, 91.6 Australian and 51 British pence.
Thank you very much. Madison Reedy, informative as ever with the business roundup for the evening. We went from a Mannering, now we're going to a Manning. Chelsea Manning is likely to be allowed to speak in New Zealand after the Immigration Office gave her special permission to apply for a visa. Now, the US whistleblower's criminal history has raised questions over free speech, with the National Party calling for her to be barred from the country. But both sides of the political spectrum are being criticised for hypocrisy on free speech matters, following the controversy over the far-right speakers Stefan Molyneux and Lauren Southern earlier this month. Mediana Johnson reports.
Immigration New Zealand has confirmed Chelsea Manning can apply for a visa under what's known as a special direction. Otherwise, the serious nature of her offending would prevent her from visiting the country. Manning spent 7 years behind bars for leaking classified information on American diplomats and the military to WikiLeaks. She was sentenced in 2013 to 35 years in prison, but was released last year when former US President Barack Obama commuted her sentence. The agency says the likelihood of her reoffending is low and she has not broken her visa conditions during speaking engagements in other countries. Mikey Tucker, whose company Think Inc. is promoting the tour, says he's confident a work visa will be granted. He compares the situation to the granting of the visas to Lauren Southern and Stefan Molyneux.
Chelsea's not coming here to preach hate speech or threaten anybody. She's coming here to tell an extraordinary story. And if you think she's a traitor, don't come. If you think she's a hero, come along and hear the story. But either way, we just want to get some intelligent discourse out there around her story and learn from it.
Mr. Tucker says the New Zealand tour will go ahead regardless of whether she is allowed to speak in Australia. The Australian government has sent Manning a letter of intent to deny her a visa. Immigration lawyer Matt Robson says there's a 99% chance Manning's work visa will be granted. He is glad that immigration law wasn't used to support a political agenda.
It would be strange given the furore over free speech in New Zealand. Here is somebody who's the opposite of the Molyneux people. They're on the right, obviously. And so, here's another viewpoint that the public are entitled to hear from. So even that aspect must have been, I hope, canvassed.
The Greens have called for Manning to be allowed to speak despite advocating for Molyneux and Southern to be banned. National's immigration spokesperson Michael Woodhouse says it isn't a matter of free speech, but that Manning should be banned because of her criminal history. But Free Speech Coalition's Chris Trotter said former prisoners have been allowed to come here and speak before, such as Nelson Mandela. He says politicians support free speech based on their political agendas.
It's been rather disconcerting to watch political forces of both the left and the right work themselves into all sorts of contortions over free speech. I'm with Noam Chomsky, who said that if you have a sentence which goes along the lines of, I believe in free speech, but then you don't believe in free speech.
Associate Minister for Immigration Chris Farfoy declined to comment on the basis the decision was made by Immigration New Zealand and it's an individual case. Manning is set to speak in Wellington and Auckland next week about her time in prison, transgender issues, privacy and WikiLeaks. For Checkpoint, call Mediana Johnson TNA.
It's just gone 19 minutes to 6. Now, say the name Nick Kyrgios and the word controversy usually follows. The high-octane, volatile Australian tennis player has stirred things up at the US Open after an unusual comeback victory. During his second-round match, as he looked to be losing, in fact he was down, I think, a set and a half, he was given a pep talk from the chair umpire. He then went on to win the match and is through to the third round. His opponent and other players say the umpire overstepped the mark. The ABC's Angus Randall reports.
A lot of talk about this. Kyrgios down 6-4-3 love. Mohamed Layani, a veteran chair umpire, out of his chair. Wish we could hear completely. Catch a word here and there. What he said was, I want to help you. You're great for tennis. I can see there's something wrong. This is not you. Can I call for a trainer? What's going on? Basically said,
this is unbelievable.
ESPN commentators question why umpire Mohamed Layani came down from his chair to speak to Australian tennis player Nick Kyrgios. The sporadic star was down 3-love in the second set after losing the first. He was double faulting, letting serves pass by and putting easy strokes into the net. But the 23-year-old Canberra native dug deep to take the second set and comfortably won the match. He's playing down any links between the incident and his victory.
He was just concerned about how I was playing. He was like, Nick, are you okay? I was like, yeah, everything's actually fine. I just wasn't feeling great. And, he let me back in the second set. He probably should have served the second set out. But, I kept staying out here, had no other choice, really. And, I got pretty lucky in the second set.
The winner of the match receives an extra $86,000. His opponent, French tennis player Pierre-Auguste Herbert, is angry at the highly unusual intervention. He says it's not the umpire's job. Nick Kyrgios says the chat made no difference to his performance.
It had no effect at all. I was 3-love down and I was 5-2 down. So, obviously didn't help at all.
The US Open says the umpire came out of the chair to be heard over the crowd and was concerned the Australian player needed medical attention. But the tennis world is questioning whether it's against the spirit of the game. Shannon Byrne is from ABC Grandstand.
This is a very solo game, the game of tennis, and they try and have it that it is a mental battle for that player to be out there on their own playing the game of tennis and have no interference. That is the debate about whether or not the chair umpire should actually even talk to a player, let alone get out of a chair and actually address them.
The world number 30 will take on Roger Federer in the third round. It's set to be even more lively than usual after the 5-time US Open winner weighed into the controversy.
It was not just about how you're feeling, I'm not feeling so well, and go back up to the chair. It was there for too long. So it's a conversation, and conversations can change your mindset.
However, his upcoming opponent has resisted the opportunity to return serve.
Yeah, it's always fun playing Roger. We played each other 3 times and it's been 7-6 in the third set every time. So I'm looking forward to it.
Nick Kyrgios and Roger Federer will play on Sunday morning.
Controversial decision there. I'm sure there will be a lot more on this. If you're a tennis fan, get in touch. 2101 is the text. What do you think about that? You're not allowed to get personal training or coaching advice during the game, but from the chair umpire, it sounds a little strange. Angus Randall with that report coming up to 5:45. Problem gambling advocates are calling for electronic gaming machines, or poker machines, to be eliminated from vulnerable communities like South Auckland. The latest national gambling study shows the activity continues to impact heavily on Māori and Pacific people, despite a decline in the number of people gambling nationwide. Indira Stewart has more.
It's Tuesday, which is payday for many locals here in South Auckland. That means pokie machines and gaming venues are often at their peak.
So you've won $110?
Yeah. And I used to tell them off and said, go home, how long you've been here? I came here, your same clothes, I see you people with same clothes. Go and see Mr. Water.
Julie lives in Otara and she's a recovering gambling addict who knows the scene all too well.
I can't stop it myself or control myself. Every time I go sit there, have a snack and look at the Sky City's light that got bling bling, and then I feel to myself, oh, the Sky City's calling me. Come Julie, I will give you some money.
A $300 pokie machine win at her very first visit to the Sky City Casino in 1998 led to a 14-year vicious cycle with gambling. She says she once spent $2,000 from her credit card in 1 week and then used up all her week's wages and her husband's wages just to win it back. Her biggest win was the $20,000 sweepstake, but at her lowest point, she pawned precious cultural items that belonged to her family and says many other Pacific problem gamblers often do the same.
Losing all my money, trying to get my money back, and then we ended up all my iron mats and fine mats, tapa cloths, ngatu, and they all gone to the pawn shop or the tola dealer, and then we ended up keep losing, and then you lose all your stuff.
The latest national gambling study shows Māori and Pacific people are the most vulnerable when it comes to problem gambling. They have high relapse rates and are much more likely to develop problems than other ethnic groups. Besio Ahoni and Paula Snowden from the Problem Gambling Foundation say the high density of gaming machines in Māori and Pacific communities is one of the biggest contributing factors to the problem.
There's 5 times more machines per person in the high deprivation areas of New Zealand than anywhere else, and that's where Māori live. Also the problem for Pacific as well.
Vulnerable communities like Pacific, like in South Auckland, are targeted, absolutely. It's not hard to figure out why our high deprivation areas targeted. Well, because vulnerable communities are just that, we're vulnerable.
They want these machines gone.
Move them out of poor areas and just make it easier for people to make a smart choice and not a silly one.
Let's get these machines out of the poorer areas, out of our communities. So, we really urge communities to have a say and actually say, no, we don't want these in our communities anymore.
Professor Max Abbott led the national gambling study.
If you look at Pacific and Maori populations, there the harm is magnified many-fold. And so we're talking about a major contribution to health disparities and inequalities.
And he agrees with Ms. Ahoni and Ms. Snowden.
The pubs and clubs have failed to demonstrate a duty of care that they're required to under law. I don't think they're capable of it with the turnover of staff and various other factors. I've come to the conclusion that, frankly, we should be getting to the point where we're not only looking to reduce these machines in these communities, but actually completely eliminate them.
At the Mangere Cosmopolitan Club, most machines are being played when we visit at 2 p.m. Manager Mike Cassidy says staff there are trained to monitor the gaming room and to ensure people are gambling responsibly and safely.
Can I walk out of here at the end of the night and feeling that, hey, we've done the best we can? To look after something which can go wrong for some people, but on the other hand is a huge community asset.
In what way?
Our gaming money, after all the tax and everything we pay on it, we're left with roughly about 62% of what goes through there. Now, that has become community money.
Ms. Snowden says that's like robbing Peter to pay Paul.
The government needs to look seriously at this whole idea of funding community projects from gambling losses. Because for the most part, people are spending money they don't have and they're wanting to win that prize to alleviate their poverty.
Mr. Abbott adds that while Pacific communities are very religious, churches are often a double-edged sword when it comes to the gambling problem.
Although they may be anti, they often use gambling as a way of raising revenue. And housing is one form of gambling that's quite strongly linked to problems, particularly with Pacific and Maori people.
Ms Ahoni agrees and says churches have often helped normalise the culture of gambling among Pacific people.
We have housing in our churches and bingos, and we've used gambling activities to raise funds for so many years that transition over from a harmless fundraising social activity in our church to a more dangerous form of continuous play. It's actually a really easy transition for our communities.
The Ministry of Health is now revising its 3-year strategy to minimise gambling harm, with community consultation meetings currently taking place around the country. Mo te hōtaka o te ahipone, ko Indira Stewart aho.
Thank you, Indira. At 10 minutes to 6, please do get in touch if you feel strongly about this. What do you think? Should we be giving more to help addicted gamblers? Should we have more restrictions in place? We're always interested in your views. Do get in touch. And of course, if you do feel you have an addiction and you want help, you can call the Problem Gambling Foundation. The number is 0800 664 262. You can get free, professional and confidential counselling. 0800 664 262. The number to call the Problem Gambling Foundation there. Now, when is a power pole too old? And when should it be replaced? That's the question Checkpoint has been asking for the past 10 days since former Aurora Energy employee Richard Healy raised concerns about an ageing power pole in the Dunedin suburb of Green Island. An inspection of the pole in 2015 said it needed replacing, but 3 years on, it's still there. And with some power poles in Dunedin installed nearly a century ago, how many others are due for retirement? Timothy Brown went to find out.
So we're standing at a pole which is clearly distressed. It's been in the ground 90 years. This pole has simply collapsed.
That's Richard Healy's assessment of pole 71862 at the intersection of Hillside Road and Burns Street in South Dunedin. A wooden pole showing signs of a failed foundation installed nearly 100 years ago. A former Aurora staff member turned whistleblower, Richard Healy sparked an audit of the network by WorkSafe in 2016. Richard says this pole is just one of more than 200 around the city, well overdue for replacement.
So how can 90-year-old poles, almost 100 years old, be on the network? Is that not unsafe?
Technically it might not be unsafe. If the pole was unusually strong when it went in, then maybe it's still in a safe condition. But law of averages would say any pole that old is well beyond its replacement date.
And in the case of pole 71862, it's not just the law of averages suggesting it may be due for replacement. Aurora's own assessment said as much last year. In 2016, the pole was mechanically tested and found to be condition 6, as good as new. But this is where things get confusing. This same pole was red tagged in 2017, a year after that mechanical test. The red tag meant it needed replacing. Now in 2018, the red tag is gone. It's now blue tagged, suggesting that after almost a century, the pole itself is safe. Mr. Healy says wooden poles are meant to have an operational life of 50 to 60 years, but our brief tour of the city found poles dating back to the 1920s and 1930s.
There's been 30 years of neglect here, and this is the result. But here's the thing, if you're going to have a risk-based strategy, you really need to accurately assess the risk. So here we've got a pole which was assessed as brand new 3 years ago, is critically damaged and in need of replacement 1 year ago, and now back to fear for its design purpose.
We asked council-owned Aurora how old a pole has to be before it's replaced. It refused to be interviewed but sent us this statement.
It's important we prioritise when to repair or replace a pole carefully, and the best method is to take a risk-based approach. In a small number of cases, we do some age-based replacement.
Aurora just wouldn't say how old is too old. But Chorus, which owns other wooden poles around the city, would. Here's Chorus's Christchurch Field Capability Manager, Lee Jensen.
Depends on the vintage of the pole, as well as how it was treated, and whether it's softwood, hardwood, larch, that sort of thing. So it really does depend.
Okay, can you give me a sort of time frame, a ballpark time frame of...
Yeah, look, those could be anywhere from 20 to 40 years, really.
Quite a difference. And Richard Healy says Aurora's use of hardwoods means they will get more life out of their poles, but not to the point of being almost 100 years old. After 10 days of inquiries, Aurora can still not tell us how many red-tagged poles it has in its network. Just this afternoon, Chorus confirmed there are 8 poles needing replacement on theirs, which brings us back to the pole which started our inquiry, pole 84194 in Green Island. 3 years ago it was red tagged, then the tag was removed. Then in June it was red tagged again. But after we asked how a pole on a dangerous lean full of rot could still be part of its network, Aurora assured us in a statement on Monday.
We expect our contractors will install the new pole tomorrow.
Meaning Tuesday. But it's the end of the week and the old pole is still there. No one at the site would say whether work will be finished today, and Aurora is still refusing to talk to us until the independent review of its assets is completed later this year. In Dunedin, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
It's 5 minutes to 6. 13-year-old twin brothers are hoping their music can help put a stop to domestic violence in New Zealand. After witnessing horrific domestic violence as children, Tane Mahuta and Te Akaraupo Pakea Heke started singing ever since they were old enough to talk. Since then, the boys known as Twin Harmony have performed their songs and their stories to a huge range of audiences at maraes, festivals and at the recent Justice Summit in Pororua. All of this, and they're only 13 years old, and they're finalists for an award at the Canterbury Youth Awards tonight in Christchurch. Logan Church took his camera and went along to meet them.
It's too far now, stand with me. No more violence in our family.
Tane Mahuta and Te Akaraupo started singing when they were only 3 years old. But a challenging childhood has now led them to start writing music about domestic violence.
My mum was a victim of domestic violence. My dad was a violence person. I was scared going through all that stuff, being under the age of 6. Hit me, beat me, use me, accuse me, feel no guilt about the way you abused me, slap me, kick me, knock me to the floor. There's nothing you could do to me that has been done before.
Their mum has since passed away, but a particularly horrific incident the twins witnessed when they were 8 years old made them realise they were not alone.
My dad, he had another girlfriend, and my dad's girlfriend had a little son, and they had a little fight, a big fight, and we didn't want to leave her son there. We felt really scared for him, and we couldn't get help, and we wanted to take him with us and go. But yeah, and that just made us really even more passionate about this, and that's when it started really changing us, and we knew that other people was going through as well.
Committing their story to song, the twins started performing to families, then local festivals. Now they are singing at maraes, and even sang at the recent Justice Summit in Pororua in front of an audience of hundreds. Living with their nana turned talent manager in Northern Christchurch, family is everything to them.
Shout out to Uncle Merv, Uncle Tubby, Uncle Mike, Uncle Ben, Uncle Lima, Uncle Big Boss, and my nana.
Twin Harmony, their stage name, are now finalists for an award tonight at the Canterbury Youth Awards. They are also working with a vocal coach to release an EP. When they leave school, they both want to enter the music industry. I asked them what they would say if they could speak to all of New Zealand.
No more violence in our whānaus, and that's what we hope that it'll change. So in the future, there'll be no more violence, no more violence.
In Christchurch, call Logan Church Tēnei.
No more violence, we are your children. No more violence.
Inspiring. Just coming up to 6. There's been a bit of feedback. Thanks for getting in touch. Someone is moved by the Kyrgios story, to Nick Kyrgios, the tennis story, to get in touch. In his defence, I'll just read it. It says, I'm a tennis fan and I follow all the major tournaments. The US Open this year is being played in such extreme temperatures that the USTA has introduced a 10-minute timeout after the third set to allow players to cool down. So there's an extra bit of time there to get the energy back and have a drink. This person who's got in touch on the text says, the umpire has a responsibility to ensure the safety of the players, and the umpire was right to check on Nick Kyrgios. So there you go, that's something a bit more balanced, and I think that is actually the official line back from the ATP and the umpire himself, so we might hear a bit more on that. Thank you for tuning in. Coming up after 6 tonight, Auckland Mayor Phil Goff welcomes government plans to set up an urban development authority to fast-track those housing projects. The Catholic boarding school Hato Petera will close after 90 years of operation. And the shot putter Tom Walsh celebrates after smashing a 30-year record and picking up the biggest paycheck of the season at the Diamond League final in Zurich this morning. Apparently he has to shout all his mates in that tight-knit team. Get in touch anytime. 2101 is the text. There's the email, there's Twitter, there's Facebook. Lots more coming up here on Checkpoint after the 6 o'clock news.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batten tēnei. The Transport Minister Phil Twyford says Aucklanders accept that fixing the traffic congestion strangling the city's economy is going to cost them personally. The government has announced a $16.9 billion investment in land transport over the next 3 years, drawn from the National Land Transport Fund, local government and Auckland's regional fuel tax. Mr Twyford has told Checkpoint Aucklanders are telling him they want the government to move fast on congestion.
We've got to get this city moving. We've inherited a terrible infrastructure deficit. The city's losing $1.3 billion every year in lost productivity because of the gridlock. This plan gets on and fixes it.
Phil Twyford says as well as improving the roads, the plan has a major emphasis on improving the quality and frequency of public transport, which will get people out of their cars and clear the roads. The owner of a Papakura rental, described as a swamp house, has been given 10 days to fix it or be hit with a fine of up to $200,000. The home owned by Arvin Raj has been deemed insanitary by the council due to severe drainage and piping issues, which creates a swamp underneath the house and causes the property to flood. Tenancy Services Head of Compliance Steve Watson, who spent 2 hours inspecting the property this morning, says the ministry may do a joint investigation with council and other regulators.
What we may consider doing is taking civil action if we believe the matter was serious enough.
Steve Watson. The Prime Minister has dismissed the political controversies this week as just being part of government. Meka Whaitiri has been stood aside as a minister while an investigation into a staffing matter is underway. It tops off a week in which Claire Curran was sacked from Cabinet, another low business confidence survey, and the withholding of the report into the Young Labour camp. Jacinda Ardern says she'll respond once the investigation into Ms Whaitiri is complete.
What I'm balancing here is principles of natural justice. As soon as I found out about this issue, I took action to make contact, of course, with the Minister. She offered up to stand aside whilst this investigation takes place. That is the right thing to do. And once we have the report completed, then I will make a decision on how to deal with it.
Jacinda Ardern says she wants the investigation done as soon as possible. The warehouse says an email to staff was sent to try to understand why the union and staff took reports of bullying to the media. Staff were sent the internal message following news reports of bullying by a store manager, Laura Dooney reports.
The warehouse says it has been put in a tricky position by the reports as it cannot defend itself through the media due to privacy laws. A spokesperson says if teams have any bullying or other accusations, they should use the appropriate channels to let people know. One such channel includes a confidential email address where people can raise problems. The company email was sent to staff in response to an RNZ report of 22 staff at the branch laying complaints against the store manager. The email says it's disappointing the matter has been taken to the media and the conduct of those who made complaints will be addressed separately. The union says the email contains a veiled threat. Ko Laura Dooney tēnei.
The Rugby League coaching legend Graham Lowe is backing an appeal by Corrections Minister Kelvin Davis for employers to hire ex-prisoners. Mr Lowe now helps prisoners learn to read and do maths with a course he's devised using the language of sport. He says it's immensely satisfying to help people get their lives on track, and it's given him a new lease of life after years of ill health.
A lot of the young men that I coached through a long period of time, there was a lot of them that could quite easily see that without that connection to the sport they're involved in, they could go down the wrong path. They delivered for me on the football field success that I couldn't imagine to start with, and so this is, I'm trying to put something back.
Graham Lowe says employers should take a look at the support available to them from corrections if they give an ex-prisoner a job and a chance to make good. The Catholic Church in Australia has rejected a recommendation which would oblige priests to report child abuse if they hear about it during confessions. The Church has responded to the Royal Commission into Child Sex Abuse almost 9 months after its findings were handed down. The BBC's Phil Mercer has more from Sydney.
Changing the rules of secrecy in the confessional was a key recommendation of a 5-year official inquiry into child abuse in Australia. 2 states have made it a crime for priests to fail to report abuse heard during a confession. But senior Catholic bishops argue the laws impinge on religious liberties, and they stress the safety of children is a priority.
Phil Mercer is in Sydney. It's 6:05. Sport. The 20-time Grand Slam winner Roger Federer has condemned US Open tennis officials and says a repeat of Flushing Meadows' umpiring farce won't happen in his third-round match with Australian Nick Kyrgios. The Swedish umpire got down from his chair and spoke with Kyrgios during his second-round comeback win over Frenchman Pierre-Hugues Herbert, despite the umpire being picked up by on-court microphones pleading with Kyrgios to try harder. The US Tennis Association claims the official was concerned about Kyrgios' health. Federer's made it clear that he wouldn't tolerate the same from an umpire.
It will not happen twice in a row. It's not the umpire's role to go down from the chair. But I get what he was trying to do. But he behaves the way he behaves, and then you as an umpire take the decision on the chair. Do you like it or don't you like it? But you don't go and speak like that.
Roger Federer. Sebastian Vettel says he doesn't feel any extra pressure driving for Ferrari at their home race. The German is 17 points behind the championship leader Mercedes Lewis Hamilton, but is favourite to win this weekend's Italian Grand Prix. Vettel won his 5th race of the season last weekend in Belgium. The title race is very much alive, but Vettel isn't overthinking it.
Looking forward to getting in the car. I think it's a great feeling when you step inside the car and you know that you can, fight for first position, for the podium, for victory on Sunday. So that's, what you want as a driver. But for the rest, I think it's healthy not to overthink.
Sebastian Vettel. That's the news.
Mobile phones in school, to ban or not to ban?
We need them to be able to focus. So why would we dump a device in front of them where the thing just glows every 5 seconds with the next Snapchat or whatever it is?
I don't think banning is the way to go. We need to teach students how to manage the devices and the distractions they provide.
This week on Insight, Teresa Cowie talks to schools about teenagers, temptation and technology. Just after the 8 o'clock news on Sunday morning with Wallace Chapman on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Waikato, including Coromandel. A few showers, some heavy, with possible thunderstorms clearing overnight. Fog tomorrow morning, then mainly fine before rain returns at night. Waitomo, Taranaki, Taumaranui, Taupo and Bay of Plenty. Fine spells and isolated showers today. Fog tomorrow morning, then mainly fine before rain develops in Taranaki and Waitomo at night. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, a few showers clearing this evening, then fine. Whanganui to Wellington, including Taihape and Wairarapa. Scattered rain more persistent about eastern Wellington and southern Wairarapa with heavy falls possible. Rain clearing overnight and becoming fine. Nelson and Bulla through to Fiordland, mainly fine. Scattered rain tomorrow night. Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland. Areas of low cloud or fog with patchy drizzle clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. And the Chatham Islands rain with some heavy falls easing to a few showers tomorrow. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
And it's with Alex Perrottet tonight, filling in for John Campbell. The Mayor of Auckland is cautiously welcoming government plans to set up an urban development authority in the city to fast-track housing projects. He doesn't, however, accept his council isn't up to the task of delivering new housing developments. Phil Goff says it's not usurping council, but he warns that it shouldn't ignore the wishes of the community. Andrew McRae reports.
The Urban Development Authority is likely to have control over up to 15 housing developments. It'll become the Planning and Consenting Authority, replacing the Auckland Council. The Housing and Urban Development Minister, Phil Twyford, says the current setup isn't working.
In Auckland, we're 45,000 houses short. So we need to build houses, and more than that, we need to build whole new communities with all of the things that communities need: infrastructure, transport, open spaces, good urban design. That will be the job of the Urban Development Authority.
The Mayor Phil Goff understands the government's desire to streamline processes to increase the pace and scale of new builds, but he has a caveat.
We will want to be sure that the right of individuals to have their voices heard when a new development is planned will still be there, and people will be able to express their views and their concerns about any proposal.
The Urban Development Authority, or UDA, will have the power to override the Auckland Council's unitary plan. Mr Goff stands by the plan, describing it as hugely successful.
Well over 12,800 resource consents issued in the last year, up 28% on the previous year, and 69% of those resource consents being for brownfield developments, so that you've got a more compact city. That shows that the Auckland Unitary Plan has been effective.
National's housing spokesperson Judith Collins says all setting up a UDA for certain areas does is leave the rest of the city out, and she has a message for Phil Twyford.
Join with us in reforming the Resource Management Act, building apps and the planning systems for the whole of Auckland, the whole of New Zealand. That is the best way to go, rather than set up an entire authority just to deal with parts of Auckland that interest the current government.
Phil Twyford says the UDA won't be a silver bullet to fix all the issues contributing to the housing crisis.
But it will enable us to build large-scale, whole new communities. I'm talking about 5,000 new homes, 10,000 new homes, in a master-planned way that delivers the kind of housing people want, affordable housing with good design. That's not currently happening.
The Property Council says an urban development authority, as suggested by the government, won't solve the housing crisis. Its CEO, Ashley Church, describes it as Soviet-style bureaucracy.
It's essentially duplicating exactly the same thing that was set up in the form of the Super City 4 or 5 years ago. So it's basically taking a solution which clearly hasn't worked and going through another process of creating that whole thing again with an inevitable outcome, which is it won't work again.
But the Mayor Phil Goff doesn't see the establishment of an urban development authority as central government trying to undermine his council.
The Minister has given his assurance that the government will work collaboratively with Auckland Council. I think we share the same objectives.
Mr Goff says he accepts the idea of a UDA and wants to be positive and constructive about it.
At the same time, when we see the detail of what is proposed, we will be making full submissions to ensure that we get that balance right between streamlining and ensuring that people have the ability to have their voice heard.
Auckland Councillor Penny Holst, who led the unitary plan, says the power of central government may work in the city's favour, even though the council's been working hard to provide more housing.
The bit that we don't hold is the pen on getting developers, financiers and planners together to actually give things a good shove and make them happen. But if the government can bring their big chequebook to the table, that's the bit that's really going to make it happen.
Local Government New Zealand supports the concept of urban development authorities because it recognises there are regulatory barriers outside the control of councils. However, its president, Dunedin Mayor Dave Cull, says he's concerned that central government may be interfering too much in local affairs.
The considerations that government might have might not take account of community needs, community apprehensions. That's why we think that if this is going to be applied, and as I say, we support its intent, then it should be done in partnership with the local council.
The Minister, Phil Twyford's hoping legislation setting up the UDA will be before Parliament by early next year, and he expects the authority to be up and running in Auckland by early 2020. For Checkpoint, call Andrew McRae-Tene.
It's 13 minutes past 6. The fight to keep a Māori Catholic boarding school open has come to an end, with the Minister of Education Chris Hipkins announcing its doors will close. Hato Petera, which first opened 90 years ago, had its integration agreement cancelled today by Mr Hipkins. The future use of the land, which is gifted to the Roman Catholic Bishop of the Auckland Diocese, has yet to be decided. Te Manu Korihi reporter John Boynton has more.
Hato Petera was set up in 1928 as a private school before becoming state integrated in 1981. At the peak of its popularity in the 1990s, more than 200 students attended. However, this year a commissioner was put in charge of the school and the school's roll plummeted to just one student. Chris Hipkins says the school is no longer capable of providing a quality education.
The sad reality is that there aren't any students left at Hato Petera, and the advice that I received from the Ministry made it very clear that any students who did enrol at Hato Petera weren't going to be receiving the standard of education that they should be.
It was costing more than $200,000 to keep the school running for one student, and the school's grounds and facilities had fallen into disrepair. With the school currently sitting empty, Mr Hipkins says the process of closing the school should be quick.
The current commissioner will work with the church and with the staff at the school to ensure that the school's affairs are wrapped up, and then the school will be closed.
In a statement, Auckland Catholic Bishop Patrick Dunn says today's decision is in the best interest of students. Dr Lance O'Sullivan is one of the most well-known alumni from Hato Petera and says being at the school he saw what proud Māori men looked like for the first time.
People like Lang Davis, to Toby Curtis, to name a few, it's inspired me to realise that Māori men with mana existed, and I hadn't seen that before I went to Hato Petera.
This future, the Catholic Diocese says, includes discussions with the Ministry of Education about the use of the college facilities by another school, and also the possibility of setting up a Hato Petera hostel and academy to support a new model of education at the current site. Dr O'Sullivan says there's also a chance to rebuild ties with small communities like the Hokianga, who were once strong supporters of the school.
Those relationships are being strained, i.e. the relevance of Hato Petera to many communities is being tested, and I think there's an opportunity to rebuild, strengthen some of those long and important and historical relationships.
Ngāti Pawa Iwi Trust spokesperson Hayden Solomon says the Trust is disappointed with the Minister's decision. In a statement he says the land the school sits on was gifted by Ngāti Pawa to the church for the purpose of educating Māori children. Mr Solomon says it's clear the school has been allowed to fall into neglect and ruin by the state and church, while other Catholic boarding schools continue to flourish. Reti Boynton is part of a group protesting the closure of the school and is occupying the school grounds.
There is no honouring of the first agreement by our tupuna that gave over this land, gifted this land with the attached agreement for the education of Māori.
The Ministry of Education and Catholic Diocese will help the remaining students enrol at other schools. The Ministry and Post-Primary Teachers Association will also work with current staff. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko John Boynton aho.
Kia ora, John. It's 17 minutes past 6. A Wellington couple is getting creative in their search for a new home, taking out a newspaper advertisement urging would-be property sellers to come forward. Each weekend for the last 9 months, Rochelle Cole and her husband John have been looking for a 3-bedroom house as far afield as Pororua and Upper Hutt. So far they've struck out because their $530,000 budget doesn't go far enough in what they describe as a crazy market. The latest QV figures show the average price of a house in the Wellington area was $651,000. Today, the Cole family have changed their plan of attack, placing an ad in the Dominion Post seeking anyone who may be interested in selling them a home. Ben Strang talked to Rochelle Cole about the difficulties of the property hunt.
It's crazy, especially if you're going to a home that's, got the 3 bedrooms, reasonably tidy, a decent family kind of size. I mean, you're going into open homes, like we went to one in Tawa, and it is jam-packed, even in the open home itself. Like, you're dodging people, and there's just so many people out there, especially in a good family, solid family home.
Have you been able to put an offer on any properties so far?
We have. We put an offer recently on a place in Tawa, but we weren't even close, I don't think, to meeting what it went for.
What was the RV on that property and what did it end up going for?
Off the top of my head, I think it was around the $365,000 mark. 3-bedroom, a sleep out, 1 bathroom, and that went for, they said 80% over RV. So I'm assuming in the mid 6s, and something like 16 offers on the table, and it sold within 9 days. When you say it out loud, it's like this is crazy. Like, it's just so hard, and and we're looking at these houses and we just know we have no chance. So we're really trying to see if we can find someone that might be interested in a private sale.
So is that how the ad in the Dominion Post came about?
Yeah. We've also done some flyers and started, putting little flyers in people's letterboxes. And then my mum was the genius behind the newspaper ad, and she sort of ran it by us. And I thought, well, at this point, we're open to anything. We will try whatever it takes. And so we thought we'd put this ad out there. Maybe there's somebody that wants to sell their family home. Maybe they're looking to downsize and they don't want to go through an agent. They don't want to have to deal with open homes. Maybe they just want a quick, easy sale, no drama. And so that would be the private sale way to go, I guess.
It's just on 20 minutes past 6. It's Checkpoint on RNZ National. An inquest into the death of a man following a suspected assault at the Serco-run Mount Eden prison in Auckland has heard evidence his death could have been caused by lung disease, although violence has not been ruled out. Now, you remember the death of 25-year-old Nick Evans in June 2015 it was one of a number of incidents really that sparked that inquiry into fight clubs, and that in turn led to Serco's contract being dropped. Amy Williams was at the inquest.
A framed photograph of Nick Evans was placed on a bench at the front of the courtroom, and in the public gallery, his mother Julie Evans cried out on hearing evidence it is possible an assault could have caused her son's death. Evans died in 2015 from a collapsed lung, pneumonia and an infection soon after being transferred to Whangarei prison. A corrections investigation found no evidence Evans had been dropped from a balcony or been involved in a fight club, but highlighted shortcomings in Serco's practice, including delays for prisoners requesting health appointments. Forensic pathologist Dr. Joanna Glengarry says her autopsy found no evidence his death was caused by violence.
In this case, no trauma was identified by investigations during Mr. Evans' time in hospital.
Dr. Glengarry told the inquest the autopsy found underlying disease in the man's lungs, commonly seen in young men who smoke.
Histologic assessment, which is examination under the microscope, and gross examination of the lungs showed features consistent with smoking, be that smoking of tobacco, cannabis or methamphetamine.
The family's lawyer, Michael O'Kearse, asked Dr. Glengarry if it was possible that Evans could have been stoic enough to put up with the pain for days or even weeks after being assaulted, rather than minutes or hours. Dr. Glengarry says it depends on whether Evans' chest pain occurred at the time of the assault.
If we accept that proposition, then absolutely it is possible for that assault to have caused a pneumothorax.
Prison Inspector Colin Roffier told the inquest it is possible prison assaults could go unreported. Dr. Erna Meyer treated Evans at Whangarei Hospital and says he was examined carefully on admission to the intensive care unit. She found no signs of injury.
I also asked him, he denied trauma, but I suspected that, or I know that prisoners don't always would relay that information, so I did examine him carefully on the 4th of June, and there was no evidence of any bruising or any trauma to him.
The inquest before Deputy Chief Coroner Brent Shorthand will continue. In Auckland for Checkpoint, this is Amy Williams.
And staying with prisons, the Corrections Minister Kelvin Davis is urging employers to hire ex-prisoners and give them a second chance at a decent life. Mr Davis told a big meeting in Whangarei today that work is the key to keeping young people out of jail. Tears flowed in the audience as 2 former prisoners backed him up. Here's Lois Williams.
Yeah, a lot of us might have bad history, but we all deserve a second chance. I think everybody in this room has had a second chance at some point in their life. I'd just like to thank you all for hearing me out.
It's hard not to be touched by stories of personal redemption, and an audience of bosses, educators and whānau was visibly moved by 2 young men who fronted up in Whangarei today. Both have served time in prison and both say they've found their path in life because of it. Michael, who's 23, credits his probation officer with getting him into a course where, in his words, he was treated like a human being.
I never really went to school, I dropped out of school when I was probably 14, 15 years old. I was pretty much living on the streets after that. Never had NCA, never had any qualifications from school.
And that course has led Michael to a job in water services with Downer Construction.
You know, I didn't really feel that great about myself before any of this. Now I've got my own house, I've got a V8, I've got all the joys of, you know, being a working man. I know everyone has bad days at work, but yeah, I do love the job. But yeah, I'm just happy I'm out working with them. Downer's a great company to work with, and hopefully be with them for the rest of my life.
The second former prisoner, Magnus, says his first experience of work came in jail when he was allowed day leave to labour on a construction site. He'd left school at 14, never been employed, and work was a revelation.
The skills and just the taste of what it's like to actually have a job and be a part of a functioning society, if you could call it that, you know, becoming a part of the community rather than being a fighter of the system, you know, just trying to be a bad bugger or trying to find a criminal career, or felt like there was no hope for me.
But Corrections asked the whangare contractor Steve Bowling to take a punt on Magnus. Mr Bowling says he was dubious at first, but he said yes.
Magnus appeared to be the right fit for us, you know, and to be blunt, he wasn't covered in tattoos. He was a big, strong boy, and we thought worthwhile giving him a go, because at the point we were reasonably desperate for good staff as well.
Steve Bowling says the gamble paid off. Magnus turned out to be hard-working, reliable and popular with his workmates, and the company's now got him into a carpentry apprenticeship. The Corrections Minister Kelvin Davis is aiming for more of those success stories. He'll need them if the government is to achieve its goal of slashing the prison muster by 30% over the next 15 years, and he's appealing to businesses to help.
When people are filling out an application form for a job at their business and they see, yes, this person's got prior convictions, that they don't just write them off, to, you know, ask more questions and find out a bit more, because we've seen two examples today of young men that have put their past behind them and have gone on and they're now contributing and valued members of the businesses they work for.
Kelvin Davis says he's made a start on reducing the prison population of 10,000. It's gone down by 700 in the past 6 months. Steve Bowling says not all prisoners might take to the working life with the same alacrity as Magnus and Michael, but he says they should at least have the chance.
Someone's got to give the guys a go. You know, they can't be held accountable for the rest of their life for one mistake they made as a young guy. We've all had our ups and downs in life, and I wouldn't be any different.
In whangare for Checkpoint, Lois Williams.
Finally tonight, the drinks are on shot putter Tom Walsh after he smashed a 30-year-old record to win the prestigious Diamond League final in Zurich. His monster throw of 22.6 metres was the furthest in the league's competition since American Randy Barnes in 1988, and ticks another box for Walsh, who has picked up 3 major titles in the past 6 months. Today's win also earned him $75,000 in prize money. And as he told sports reporter Barry Guy, it probably means the bar tab will be on him.
It's my second furthest ever. So, you know, it was great to come out after the first round. The guys had some big throws and to come out and throw so well in that second round and drop that bob and then put the pressure back on them.
Where's that come from? I've followed you on social media. You're training well, all that sort of thing. You know, you're in the right nick. Yeah,
look, the last few comps, I've had 3 comps while I've been in Europe the last 10 days. And I've been a little bit rusty, to be honest with you, but this last 5 days of being in Zurich and doing a little bit more training and stuff has got me going well and got the wheels turning right. And also my coach has turned up as well, so that always helps me too.
What does this sort of result mean for you?
Well, I think this year there was 3 things I really wanted to do. One was to win in World Indoors, I did that. Second one was to win Commonwealth Games, I did manage to do that too. And then the third one was to win the Diamond League, and I've managed to do that. So I've had 3 wins right there, and just how I want them.
And a lucrative result for you. Do you have to go and shout the boys now, do you?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure the boys want me to shout them, that's for sure. I've got no way out of that one.
So are you competing in the Continental Cup?
Yep, I'm competing in the Continental Cup in about 10 days' time. So that should be another good comp, and it's another good payday as well.
So you're coming to the end of your northern season. Do you start thinking about, you know, next season and that sort of thing, where you're at now? What do you want to achieve?
Oh, look, there's definitely little things that we need to tidy up, for sure, as there always is. But at the moment, you know, I'm just trying to enjoy the moment, especially now. And look, we'll think about a few things over the next 10 days that we're in Europe, 2 weeks, and you know, come up with we'll have a debrief once I get home as well to address those things that the ideas we come up with that we can fix.
Someone told me you might have to get a new tattoo.
New tattoo? No, not this time around. I've already had one of those, but you know, my coach Dale and I had another bet, and I was off, you know, being able to give him whatever type of haircut I wanted by about 6 centimetres, which was a little bit disappointing, but I got pretty close to it.
Do you think you can better your PB?
Well, I'm in pretty good nick at the moment, so there's no reason why I can't, as long as I stay fresh physically and mentally.
That's Checkpoint for this evening. Thank you for tuning in. You can catch up on all our stories on the website. Get along there to rnz.co.nz. We hope you have a good weekend. We also hope the Warriors win, don't we? Surely they will turn up to play tonight with Simon Mannering's 300th game. From Alex Perrottet and all the Checkpoint team, have a great night.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Transport Minister says Aucklanders are telling him they want the government to move fast to clear congestion on the city's roads. Steve Watson of Tenancy Services says they may take civil action against the owner of a so-called swamp house in Papakura. The Prime Minister says she'll decide how to deal with Meka Whaitiri once an investigation into her actions has finished. The warehouse says it's trying to understand why the union and staff took reports of its bullying to the media. And Graham Lowe is backing a call for employers to hire ex-prisoners. Our next news and weather is at 7.
This week on Music 101, we've got a lineup that'll blow your early to mid-90s little socks off. Legacy bands reuniting all over the show. We're joined in studio by Super Ed. We'll have a sit down with Belter Space. And Fiona McDonald from Headless Chickens is in